Welcome to a facilitator's journey. Today I talked to Kurt Lindley. We didn't have a script for this. I normally have questions written down. We just didn't do that. And we just talked. And I cried right at the end. So you're going to have to listen to the end why I cry. But the conversation was brilliant. We just talked about our businesses, what was happening for us right now. How do we find business? We talked about beginnings. We talked about endings. And it was just a very heartfelt conversation. So it's quite different to some of the other episodes that we've done on here. So I just invite you to get a cup of tea, plug in your ears and take a seat with me here on the pink chair. Hey, Kurt.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good, actually. It's nice to actually have this event punctuating my week, so it's nice to have this.
Thank you. So welcome to a facilitator's journey, where we discuss all things about running a business as a facilitator, a trainer, coach, a consultant. The question I ask everyone at the start is, how did we meet? How do we know one another?
So this for me is one of those weird things where we didn't meet. Well, we met in a what is perceived to be a traditional way in this modern era, but actually we knew of, or at least I knew of you through LinkedIn and various social media. And then one day we happened to be in a bar in London during an event and we saw each other physically and it was like, oh, that's you.
Yeah.
Which has then led to this. So that was a good meeting and a good connection.
We need to say thanks to Helen Marshall and the women
in the
community for that one. So thanks, Helen. And Kurt, just so our audience, our listeners know, how do you describe what you do?
Oh, I've got some cheesy lines that I use. So for starters, my thing is about putting yourself in places to be found. So it's not good enough to be good. It has to be seen and timely. And what I actually do in the context of work is help people get more from what they already have, and whether that's a business and its structures and systems of people and how they operate and work, whether that's an individual and the executive coaching part around helping them see what's right in front of them maybe and how to get past it, or if it's learning and development, like using the science of learning to make the most out of any interaction you have with a learner. So, yeah.
Okay. And so help me understand a bit more, what kind of things would you do in a typical week then?
Oh, I love it. So I work around my life, I suppose. So it's not simple, but I generally try to only work 9 till 3 because I have children to care for and a family to be around. And I also need to take care of myself in that process. So I tend to fit in a number of runs during that. And I'm saying that before I talk about work because I think that's what allows me to work well.
Yeah.
And then I follow my energy day by day, week by week, in terms of the work I do. So we all have lists of to-do jobs. Some we like more than the others. Some we have to get done, and we put that in a diary. But generally, I'm like, what is today's energy bringing me, and where should I spend my time? So does today feel like an email day where I can communicate very well through the written word to clients? Or does today feel like a project day where I actually want to sit, I want to read, I want to manifest, I want to create, and I want an output which is like makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. You get your own personal dopamine hit. Or is today a day where I want to go meet people, I want to converse, I want to develop myself through those conversations? So I try to punctuate my week with those sorts of things. Hence the reason looking forward to this, because I've been seeing this on the horizon going, that's going to be a cool conversation. Yeah. I'm saving myself for it.
I'm really curious about that diary management, if you want to call it such. Like how do you plan in advance then? Or do you have things that you put in advance?
Yes and no. So I have I would refer to my diary as like a series of anchored things. So I only work those hours generally. Mm-hmm. If I work outside of that, that's fine. I just have to plan it in. Family need to know about it, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I always have on the horizon the thing that needs to be done or completed. And then I just look between now and then when I think I'd like to work on it. But I'm really comfortable with moving that around. So ironically, I share my diary with my partner and my mother. And they are forever getting pings on their phone, which says, Kurt's moved this an hour forward or an hour backwards. Because I'm very deliberate in how I chunk my time. So
Yeah.
Whilst we had this conversation with my partner yesterday, I like structure but not routine. Routine is, for me, is boring. It takes away the fun of working for yourself, and it really brings me down. But I need structure to allow myself to get work done. So I have to
Definitely.
balance that way of operating. So generally what I'm supposed to do on a Monday, I could end up doing on a Wednesday because it just feels better.
So
As
does
long as
that
it gets
mean,
done.
yeah. Okay, so I'm sitting here thinking, for those of you who are listening, because my brain's going, my diary, the way it's structured at the moment, if I have white space for design, that has to stay as white space for the design. And then all around it, though, maybe on another day, I have meeting days. So I just know those are meeting days. I'm like, I wouldn't be able to do what you do and suddenly go, oh, I don't feel like having those meetings today.
I think meetings are the things that are often you can't change because they're defined by a client. So they'll come to you
Yeah.
and say, we want to meet on this day. So those are the anchors. And then I just go, right, if I'm having a 10 o'clock meeting and I'm working from 8:30, what's the 8:30 till 9 or 8:30 till
Yeah.
10 that I need to do to make sure I'm present for the client?
Yeah.
So what's the energy that I need to fill in that
And do
space? And
you ring fence that time in your diary then? Like, and
yeah,
deliberately put it in so that no one else can put anything else in?
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I do.
absolutely. Yeah,
I can buy into the, by the way, I think you and I are kindred spirits in I like structure, but I don't like routine. So I wrote about it recently on LinkedIn. Like I said, I live and die by my diary. If it's not in there, it doesn't happen. To the extent someone said to me, another guest on this podcast from a while back was like, you forgot I said, have I ever upset you? And he said, you forgot my birthday. I was like, when's your birthday? Anyway, I said, oh, it's not in my diary. I said, it's now in my diary. I've put it in as a reoccurring yearly forever. But I'm dreadful. My whole family know, especially birthdays. I'm awful. Sorry, anyone listening to this whose birthday I've forgotten and you are a good friend. I apologise.
This thing though is like this is the science again of like how people operate and science. So just writing the other day about cognitive offloading. So the stuff that we don't want to hold in our brains because we're occupied by other things. So I saw it the other day, like we've offloaded our memories of dates like birthdays to Facebook. So it'll tell us it's somebody's birthday. So if you're on Facebook, you generally know when somebody's birthday is, not because you remembered it, but because it sent you a prompt. So we have no need to remember remember birthdays.
And phone numbers.
I don't remember my phone numbers for anybody other than myself, ironically. Not even my daughter or my partner, because my phone has it. So I've offloaded all this. And yes, that's helpful, particularly for somebody. I get what you might call decision fatigue. So I use a sat nav to get to most places I already know how to get to, because I don't want to make decisions. I want it to direct me there. I want to save my decision-making energy for the thing that I'm doing when I'm arriving, when I'm there. And people laugh at me going, you know how to get home? Yes, but I'd have to think about it. Whereas I just press go on this, I follow the blue line and I arrive at some point. So it's cool.
Yeah, nice. So the conversation today, Kurt, before the guest and I come onto the podcast, we normally have a set-up call. And Kurt and I worked in a slightly different way in that we one day met to like have a chat and to connect, and then had a brilliant chat. And I said, oh, I think you should be a podcast guest. And he wholeheartedly agreed. So we haven't done any prep. And then I just said to him before we started this recording, what do you fancy talking about? And we're both like, I don't know, let's just talk about the state of play of running a business today in 2024 as a consultant, a coach, facilitator, or a trainer. So that's where we're going, team. This is an unscripted, I haven't got any questions. We'll see how it flows. It might work. It might be an utter disaster, and Kurt and I just like sit here giggling. Who knows? So come with us on this journey. And Kurt might ask me questions as much as I ask him questions. That's the other thing we've agreed, which is a bit different. But okay, here's a question. How's business at the moment? What are you noticing?
Business is good at the moment, but that could be different in a week's time. So one of the things that I have to consistently manage is the concept of being a sole trader, now independent, limited company. You're you sometimes you only have 2 months work ahead, if that, and you feel safe and secure with that, but you know that at month 3 right now there isn't anything potentially. There's some leads, they may be warm, they may be cold. So yeah, I can say happily, yeah, on the horizon, me and a colleague are off to Poland to work with the World Anti-Doping Association. A week later, we're off to Aberdeen to work with the oil industry. Then I get to go away to Carcassonne for a weekend with my partner as a break. But actually, the following day, the Tuesday after the bank holiday in May, I don't know what I'm doing, and I've got to not get too worried about that.
Yeah,
I've got to go, right. Don't worry, because on Monday you've got a call with a client that's introducing you to somebody at Oxford Business School.
Yeah.
Okay, well that might lead to something. Fingers crossed. Work in the right way, and it has. And I've operated like this for 5 years now, maybe 6. So it seems to be okay. But there is like, I don't know if we need to go down this avenue, but actually there is something in that. 4 years ago it was different because I was a single parent of a then 6-year-old child. So I only had to worry about life for me and my daughter. And we'd spend most of our time together, and we would work what we needed to work to make the money we needed.
It's how the
now
world goes.
In a relationship, there's more children, there's more responsibility. Suddenly the concept of like that way of working is different to you now, because you feel a greater responsibility for more people and what their needs might be, and both being present for them but providing for them. So I'm not as flippant as I used to be when it comes to, don't worry about it, workload here. I'm a bit more deliberate.
Circumstances have shifted and changed. I think I can't remember who said it to me, but they were talking, either I heard this on a podcast, they were talking to a friend and they said, how's business? And they were like, I've only got, the trainer person was like, I've only got like a month's worth of work or 3 months worth of work. And the friend was a decorator, and he said, I only ever have 2 weeks.
That was our conversation.
Oh my God.
It was my mate who was a plasterer.
Yes.
He says, he said, well, when I was starting out in business, I was like, talk to me about you being a sole trader, because he's a sole trader and he's got a plastering business. And he says, I've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years now, Kurt. And I was like, so how is it? And he says, I've only ever had 2 weeks work. And I went, what do you mean? You've only ever had 2 weeks work? He says, I've only ever had 2 weeks work for the last 5 years. He says, when this week's done, I'll know somebody will call me and offer me some work for the following week. And that's it.
Amazing.
And I was like, well, if he can do it and he's done it for 5 years, maybe I can do it. So that's it. Like, I've only got 2 months work.
Yeah.
In our world, how we roll. Different. Yeah. But in a month's time, hopefully.
And I'm the same. So I can see work now up till the end of June. Just to give context, if you're listening, not in the order, it is now middle of April. So when this was recorded. So end of June. What I'm noticing though, that one of the questions, maybe I refine my question. Like, how have you found it this year with clients? Is it busier? Is it quieter? Is it the same?
I think year on year it's different. I think it's more my own impression or perception of it. So I think I've had to grow up each year I've had to grow up and be more of a mature business person to try and understand the seasons, because in the past you might have gone, it's quiet. But when you've been doing it 3 or 4 years, it might not be that it's quiet. It's just that's the season. So, in certain industries, there are busy periods, busy seasons, and quiet ones. And if you start to forecast that better, it's not a quiet period. So I come from the sporting world. So I look at this and I go, right, okay, I now know January can be a quiet period. So what would an athlete do during a quiet period? They're not competing. They've come off the back of a competition, that sort of thing. What they probably do is they'd either give themselves a break, or they'd try and learn a new technique or skill. So I take those quiet periods now and go, what new thing do I need to do, get better at, create? Yeah. So this January, it was about, can I create a community of learning and development practitioners that come together in a physical space in my home city of Doncaster. Can it be done? And the 25th of April, we're hosting our second one, and the attendance is looking good. But it came out of that quiet period in January where I didn't know really what to do with my time. So I was like, right, how do I find the community? How do I build a community? What does the community want to hear? Which I'd never had the time to do when it's busy. So I now don't necessarily. Sorry, I manage the quiet periods better by saying that's the time for me to get better at something.
I love it. I agree. It's very easy to get a quiet period or look forward into the diary and go, oh, I've got a gap of 2 weeks. Oh, I need to fill it. But actually, we need those quiet moments of stillness, of silence, to allow something else to come, for something to settle, to let something go, to reset ourselves, to nurture ourselves, like some downtime. Like, because if you don't do that, you're going to be no use to man or beast if you don't take some breaks. But also something always comes in those moments. So I love your reframe of taking from your sporting background. Like, okay, so what would an athlete do off a busy period or a competition? Like how do they use their time? I love that.
Do you have a thing that you do in the quiet times, or do you look at those quiet times and go deep inhale?
I've got better. So I've now worked for myself since 2008, and it's 2024, and I've got used to the quieter times. Natural quiet times that I notice December and August, just every year, the rhythm, because L&D, holidays, just the way it is. What I have noticed in the last 6 months, though, was it felt quieter than normal, and that really freaked me out. And I probably didn't do what you've just said. I had a mini meltdown and a panic, but what that meant I did was I talked to lots of people. I did some investigation. I've decided it is a blend of some of my inaction of late last year, post the operation I had on my nose, and also the economy, the world economy as it is. So something I discovered just a week ago, 64 countries in the world are in election this year. And the big countries, America, Russia, UK, the EU is in a re-election period as well. And then a plethora of African, Indian, Pakistan, Mexico, like all these countries are going to election. So what that then does is for businesses, there is a wobble because they don't know what their new governments are going to do from a tax or a business break perspective. So that I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I'm also noticing customers are taking a little bit longer to make decisions or to say yes, or they challenge things a lot more. And I think, again, that's in a backdrop of, especially in Europe where we are, I think that's on a backdrop of inflation, cost of living going up, and therefore people are they selling as much? So I think there's all of that happening.
So it makes me think there's two things that come to mind, and I'm hoping I remember both of them because we'll go down one track and then we'll have to come back to the other one. So the breakdown piece, like that, I think that's normal. I just don't think people talk about it. And that disappoints me to some degree because I think more of us need to know that there are other people going through kind of this sort of thing. So I would come off the back of a big project feeling very good, and then literally 24 hours later feeling very bad, thinking, well, where's the next thing? And does anybody love me? And am I any good? And I'm very blessed by, I've got about a group of 6 people that belong to a WhatsApp group called the Ideas team. And we share thoughts as and when we need. It can be dormant for months or it can be very busy. But they're all people that I will phone in these times and go, this is how I'm feeling. Like, is it real? And we have like these informal coaching conversations that lift me back into a place of, the only thing I can compare it to, again, from an athlete perspective. So I used to run ultra marathons, and you'd work really hard to get to the ultra marathon. You'd do the event, you'd complete the event, and you'd go, right, I've crossed the line, brilliant. Literally 24 hours later, the only thing I can describe it as depression. Like, because the goal that you're achieving, you've achieved. and you'd fall, and you'd be like, instead of living in the celebration of success of crossing the line and giving yourself a rest and then looking for the next thing if you needed it, or just enjoying that period, you'd be like, oh, well, what do I do now? Like, what do I do with myself? How do I manage? And I would come off the back of these events like really low. So I'm just intrigued, like how are you again managing
so
ups and downs?
What was going on for me in November is I had the operation, and I was feeling quite meh about work in general. Like I just didn't have this energy of forward momentum. And then I noticed that I just wasn't being asked, like normally I'm very blessed. Clients seem to just spring up at the right time. We have a great conversation, write a proposal, the next piece of work, and it rolls. And I have a team as well and can give other people work, which gives me great joy. And suddenly it was like there was more money going out of the business than there was coming into the business. And that was the first time I had that experience in probably 5-6 years, like, and or ever maybe, and cash flow concerns, because there was also some big invoices outstanding that hadn't been paid. So there was like these cash flow concerns. And I was just like, oh, I don't really know what to do with that. And I really panicked, and it was super quiet, and it just felt horrible, really horrible.
And that takes me to the second point, because you talked about cash flow and money. And this is like the balance of who we are and the pragmatics of being a business owner, I think are quite important in this conversation.
Yeah.
Like who we are is our feelings and our emotions. And, you know, we are a person as well as a business owner, but a business owner looks at the bottom line. So you don't need to share. But
That's right.
when you say contracts and stuff like that, what I'll share mine. So
ask a question.
So contract sizes, are we talking that a lot or more of your contracts are above £20,000 per contract or below £20,000?
I can literally oscillate in a year between 100k down to 4k.
Yeah,
it just depends.
And that's where the danger sometimes lies, because there's this huge kind of spectrum of income associated with the lower end and the top end, and what it means. Whereas I think where I have less challenge is I've chosen to stick at a lower end of contract size with multiple clients, because the fear of a reliance on one or two people. So my contract sizes are generally between maximum 30,000, minimum usually about 1,000. So in the middle, we've got like a bunch of 4,000 and 5,000. So that you can manage a lot easier when you don't get something come in that you expected, or when you do get something, it keeps things ticking over. But as soon as you head into the bigger numbers, it's brilliant and it makes you feel good, but it comes with this risk of if it
but I don't go seeking out those big numbers. Only happen once, twice a year, but I don't go seeking them out. They often come on the back of an incumbent asking us for some more work or to support them. But I wasn't even getting the smaller contract inquiries at that point. And that was really freaking me out. And then I went into January and I was just like, oh my God, it was so quiet. I was just like, where is everybody? It's like, felt like it was like those tumbleweeds blowing down a street in the wild, wild west. But one of my team, Victoria, who's worked with School of Facilitation for the last 10 plus years, Vix always goes, trust the void, Kirsty. And she's right, because something will always come in those quieter moments, which is great.
I'm loving this because it's making me think lots of things again that I'd like to ask you. So
go on.
If we continue down that vein. So do you wonder whether or not you've gone beyond the reach of your part of your client base? So as you've grown as a business, you've got better. Your expertise has increased, your breadth of skill and what you can do is, and sometimes with it, your rate. So even if this client base that you had before can still afford you, their perception of you is different now. You're almost like you're too good for them. So they have to maybe look elsewhere. So they might see you as not elitist in a bad way, but you've moved into a new echelon, and that's beyond where they previously looked. That's beyond where they found you. I wonder if that ever happens.
No, I've never thought like that.
Yeah. Because I wondered, like, as you start out as a startup, you'll choose lots of work in lots of different places. You'll work at a lower end, you'll get paid less, and then you suddenly get the rate that you're comfortable with, and you start to move to have that consistency. And the clients you had before either can't afford you, or they see you now in a different light because you've.
Yeah, I've always worked with global companies when I've been running my own business. So I've either worked with global companies or community. So there's two separate parts of the business. And I guess I'm really lucky, the roll call of clients that I've been asked to work with are just big names, and they are happy and prepared to pay a higher project rate. But what's happening now is actually, Kurt, maybe the slight opposite is School of Facilitation is getting known more and more, and people are coming and knocking and wanting the conversation. And even some government agencies in the UK, and they're like, but we can't afford that. And I'm like, okay, but you want to work with me? Yeah. Okay. But these are, how do we reconcile the rates? Because then, so it's like, do I take the work? Because it's great that there's work, but the request would be, in some instances, you need to half your day rate. And I'm a bit like,
Yeah.
No.
So do you ever go, I'm going to do the work, but I'm acknowledging with you that this is half of what I would normally get, and I'm doing this because of the likelihood of future ongoing work that might, once I've proved myself, you'll see the rate, because the worry is you have set a precedent, like that's my rate, and they go, okay, that's your rate forever. And it's like, no, that's the rate for you on this particular project, given our proof of concept that we need to get across, or the faith that you need in me to pay more. Or
no, I don't. I will have the conversation, and I will then go, how can we get creative? If you have procurement barriers, let's work around your procurement barriers of what we can invoice and how often.
And that's a tricky thing as well. Sometimes it's, the system we've got means that we can only give you a contract for this size. You can only invoice for this amount this often, and then you're like, oh, we've moved away from what's the project trying to deliver?
Yeah, what's the outcome you want to achieve here? We're just all focused on the money, and that's not where you want to be. So that's a good question. And I don't know the answer. What you said something earlier as well, which two things. One that struck me was like, you've gone from sole trader to limited recently. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
Congratulations, because I always think that's requires a congratulations, and I'll explain why. In Britain, you can be a sole trader or you can be a limited company, but if you hit a certain level with your turnover, and it's 85, is it 85,000 pounds now, you have to pay value added tax. You have to add that to all your invoices. And I think that's a brilliant like step in evolution for someone, like the fact that you're now turning over more than 85,000 a year. So congratulations.
What's really like, again, this is like, sounds really a bit we can't swear, can we? This sounds a bit dickish, but there are times when I have sat and gone, maybe I'll just get a job. Like, I don't know if I need the energy that it requires to find work, to put myself out there, all that. You get a day job, somebody will just pay you regardless, and you can get away with mediocre work generally, and you'll be all right. And then I realized the privilege I've got. So the income I generate comes off the back of a probably, on average, 25-hour week. I don't know anybody else that works a 25-hour week who earns that money. So I'm not saying I'm rich and I'm minted and look at me and I'm amazing. What I'm saying is, I have decided for this period of time in my life to protect my time with my daughter and my family. I will work these hours, and I will work as much as I can with clients around those hours. There will be periods of time, like we went to Kenya before Christmas and I was gone for a week and I worked 16-hour days. So I'm not saying I don't work long hours and I don't have periods when I'm working really hard, but I'm saying on average, I work 25 hours a week and I generate enough money that will serve my family. And it's not about building some uber amazing machine that's going to compete against the biggest and the best. It's about prosperity over profit. Like
Yeah.
profit's important, but prosperity and health and well-being is key to the success. And you're talking about resetting, like
Yeah.
just talking the other day about a colleague. The colleague I was talking to this morning actually works for British Rowing, and he's delivering a session today with a number of rowing coaches around mental health as a performance measure rather than a HR thing. So the idea of good mental health and well-being, meaning you are a better practitioner, and therefore you can get more performance out of yourself and the people you're working with. And then suddenly you see it through a new lens, which is
Yeah.
my ideas are better, my thinking is more informed,
Yeah.
my communication is because I'm well. I'm well as a human and physically and here. So no, I'm not going to work 37, 40 hours weeks because that's what everybody else does, because I won't be as productive, I won't be as good, and I
Yeah.
won't deliver against the outcomes that clients want. So 25 hours. And again, there's a book on my shelf over here. It's about how much is enough. It's a book about 1935's economics, and it talks about how during the Industrial Revolution, I think it was, the idea of productivity would increase to a degree that people would stop working 60 and 80-hour weeks. And what we could do is we could drop to a 17-hour week if we wanted to, and have the productivity of the previous sort of years, because we had machinery that would help us. But what happened is they just went, no, we'll drop the hours from 60 to 40 as a minimum and keep you working really hard and just produce more stuff. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're intended to do. We're getting better and more efficient so we can work less, not produce more in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So I
I love it. Love. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is you're very clear. I work 9 till 3. I'm there for my daughter and my other children. How do clients, because I can hear a woman saying that, and excuse me if I get all my language, like my equity, diversity, inclusion language all wrong. However,
don't feel guilty for it. This is a thing that I have as well. Is like,
this is what I'm curious is, like, how do your clients respond? Because I can imagine perception that they're okay. They could go, oh, a woman's got to go and pick the children up, or looking after her kids. And then if a man says it, I wonder, is there a different response? Is there a response, or do they just go, oh yeah, cool?
Well, again, you talk about being blessed because of the clients you've got. Again, I'm blessed because of the clients I have or have attracted. So I watched a Simon Sinek video years ago, and he summed it up really well. And it was something to do with, he only works with clients who want to work with him, because in operating in that way, he doesn't have to spend time convincing them that this is the way to do things. They've already bought into his philosophy and process. So if I find a client is challenging me and wants to meet at times that are not going to be conducive for my life, and they don't understand the importance of that, and they're more about what they need for their outcomes, I'll present to them the risk that they're taking with that and say, look, we can do some of it that way and some of it a different way. But if it continues in this vein, you're going to get a better output from somebody else.
Yeah, nice.
So those move away from me, which is fine. And I have to acknowledge that I've lost that opportunity, but it might have actually cost me in the long run the time that I need for me and my family, my partner, and as such. So again, it's a brave decision, some would say. I think it's a sensible one.
I think it's a sensible one. I really like your language as well that you've just shared there, in terms of, we can work in this way, but I also want to work in this way. But if we continue on a particular vein, that isn't, I think you'll be better working with someone else who can work that way, because that will not work for me. And the fact that you're open about that. But the way you say it is, the way you framed it in my head is like, it sounds a lot kinder, and it's a lot more.
I think we again, as we grow up in this world, we have a perception that this is how business is, and we've been presented with, I don't know, Wolf of Wall Street and films that we've like created. Oh, that's what business looks like, and it has to be cutthroat or hard. Or, well, it can be if you want to be in that world, but also it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And most of those people generally who are working too hard or pushing people too much or asking more than they should be from people, they're generally unwell themselves in some way. So they're hiding something, or they are on the brink of an epiphany, which at some point means that they leave that world. You see people all the time leaving the corporate world to live in the hills and be away from stuff because they've burnt themselves out.
Yeah.
If they only knew a bit sooner that actually, if you work to both kind of like parties' needs and strengths, you can probably get a better outcome.
Get that better outcome.
Yeah.
How when you start working with a new client, what kind of conversations do you have with them? Like to agree ways of working? Like what do you do?
So this is where you can tell if a client's going to be a good client or not in terms of working with them. I have kind of 3 or 4 broad questions that I start with. What is the problem that you believe you have? How do you know that's your problem? So what evidence sits behind it? And when I say, how do you know that's your problem? Your perception of it may be very different to the shop worker's version of it.
Yeah.
So we have to do that. And then how much are you willing to invest? Because again, that will tell you if they want to make a change or not. And that investment can be money. It can be my time. It can be their time. It can be other resources.
Brilliant.
But what that often leads to is sometimes a new client doesn't become a client for 6 months or 12 months because they've realized the problem they presented me with isn't actually the problem. They need to go back and find more evidence. Or the problem is the problem, but changing the state of behavior or practice is going to cost too much money and the positive impact is minimal. So they might spend £150,000 on changing this process and save 20 grand or save an hour a day. So is it worth it? No, it's better to mitigate for that challenge. So then we talk about how do you manage the challenge rather than change it? How do you accept the situation, or how do you help other people accept it? So it's never about, I want you to buy this thing.
Yeah.
It's about understanding what their unique kind of situation is and then responding to it.
Nice. I like that question about how much you're willing to invest, which I'm sure initially they might all go, well, you want to know the money? And it's like, and energy and time.
Yeah. Like, how many people will you put on this? Is it down to me to make the change? Is it down to you? Am I working with you? Am I facilitating your change? And I'm on the back kind of like, as a coach in the corner sharing thoughts, or you want me the for?
Yeah.
And what's that going to mean as a disturbance? Because you've got this outsider coming in, and how people, so you can talk about all of those things with people, and you go, now, sadly, a lot of people opt for very small interventions and have a desire to come back and have more. Yeah. But the procurement process is often get in the way. So what you have is a number of punctuated kind of like momentum givers, and that's all they are. They give momentum. They don't lead to change that often. It's the elongated programs where you work with people in a period of time where change occurs, but those are few and far between because people are afraid of investing that much time and money into something, not knowing if it'll work, because we can't promise it'll work. It's learning and development. It's people. Yeah. Oh my goodness. We can increase the likelihood of positive change. That's as much as we can express, and that's really hard for some, like for an engineer, for example, to hear when they want a specific gain.
Yeah, tell me exactly what's going to happen and what's going to be different. What else is going on in your world at the moment? What else are you noticing out there?
What am I noticing? I think I'm more noticing what's going on inside of me. Like a tension with the systems, like the procurement processes and the bodies that manage money and all that. And it's like, I want a really good relationship with them, but I'm finding that I have my biases are clicking in and getting in the way, and I don't like them. And I don't even know if I know these people or the systems enough. But I had a client recently. It's just been really, really hard work. And I've told them at every meeting, like, I don't know if I think you're wasting your money. I think we're wasting time here. And we had our last call this week, I think it was. Oh, no, it was last week. Last week. And I was like, I'm so glad that's over, because I literally think you were told that you must do something in this space. So you've brought me in and I've said, here's the thing. And you've gone, yeah, but just not yet. Yeah, but just not yet. Or not in that way. And I've gone, yeah, you're just wasting money. So I'm noticing I'm not as I've got older, I'm not as objective sometimes in those situations where I can take myself away and go, okay, what would Kurt say to that person sitting there to help them reframe it, to make something more of it, to have a better conversation with a client, to lead to change. Whereas I'm going, do you know what? I'd rather go and have a cup of tea.
It's interesting, isn't it, as well? Like sometimes conversations start off well and then your body kicks in and you get like this felt sense of, oh man alive, this is hard. This is hard. That's my one. It's like, or excited, like this is exciting. I'm really excited for this project. So there's both sets of emotions, and how our body tells us that, not our brains.
Oh, but I mean, this particular contract, it's overrun year on year, but it was like a client local, so really easy to work with and get to because it's on my doorstep. I think there might have been about 16 grand in it, which is like a good contract for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is brilliant. I think I spent 4 grand.
Oh my God. And did it take as much time
protracted.
to Yeah.
And I was like, it was better off not being involved and doing something else with my time, and them using their time more wisely would have been better. Like, if you look at the Project Bleed, they would have had to send emails that they actually don't need to send. They would have to ask permission for things they don't need just to keep me happy or to keep the relationship going. Whereas it just got, let's give that money to charity instead.
Did you guys just agree to call it a day then?
Yeah, well, it was one of those, like, I think we're at the end of this now, aren't we? I was like, yeah, I think we are. And that's, and we'll let it sleep for a little bit, and then we'll nudge each other at some point to see how each other is, because it is a client I would like to work with because of what it's trying to do. And its internal systems are just making it hard. But
what warms me, Kurt, is you're sort of saying it's very easy sometimes to grip to the money and get, one of my strong goes, you get grippy. Laura talks about getting grippy. And if you try and hold on to something, it'll move further and further away. And in this example, you're like, actually, I wasn't like gripping onto the concept of £16,000, because ultimately it became very obvious that this energetically feels heavy and hard or difficult or awkward. Choose the adjective. So as you said, when they said, well, like, we've come to the natural point, I could even see it in your body language just here. You went, time to move on. And that's okay. And sometimes I think we have to be okay with those moments, because otherwise, and I've got a client like that as well, where I literally just wrote today in an intention setting session, I think this will be the last year of working with them, because it's just sometimes, it's just hard. And I need to do a professional divorce because it's not working.
That's a great phrase. I love that. A professional divorce.
You need a professional divorce. Okay, we coined a phrase. If anyone wants to borrow that from Kurt and Kirsty, the 2 Ks, feel free to tag us on LinkedIn if you have a professional divorce.
That's we should explore that. That should be a blog. That should be a follow-on. Somebody should write something about that.
I wonder if that people must have done that, like divorce their clients.
Yeah. And the story of it being amicable versus not. So I have like a perception that I have, they're not quite a client, but there's a perception that there's a distance between me and a particular, let's call them a client. And I'm like, was that the not so amicable divorce? Whereas this recent client is, I think we've come to our natural close. We can professionally agree to go.
Okay, I've got another analogy. Has a client ever cheated on you with another training company?
No, they haven't.
Do you want a story?
Have you got a good one?
Yeah, I have actually. So this is when the lawyers listen to it and she goes, you can't do that. I'm not saying any names, but basically last year we've been working with a global company. We'd been introduced into another region, and we'd done a load of work, done a load of design, and then lots of delivery, and it was great. And then they started to ghost us when we were they wanted some more work. They'd asked our team for time, so we'd given it. And then they were ghosting us when we were trying to move to the final stage of getting the PO and just confirmation at times. Didn't hear anything. And in the end, I was just like to my team, well, I'm really sorry. I'm almost embarrassed. I can't get hold of anyone. I guess we've been ghosted and it's not happening. Then about six months ago, someone who knows me through the School of Facilitation community messaged me on LinkedIn and said, hey, can I ask you about client X? Do you know them? Because, and I'm like, yes, I do. And they're a very unusual client. And I was like, how's that? She said, we've been asked to do some delivery and they've given us the content, but it says School of Facilitation all over it. And I just wondered what was going on. So I said, this isn't a conversation for email, let's talk. And basically, this client had gone out to somebody else. So they ghosted us, then claimed they'd written the content. And it is their content. We wrote it for them. So I have no problem with that. But to say they wrote it themselves when we'd done the writing, left our branding and language all in it, and gave it to another company to deliver. Now, I laughed. And I just thought it was it just demonstrated to me why we weren't working with that client anymore. But it did just make me go, geez, blimey.
Yeah. No, I've not had that happen, but do you know what it makes me think? What if I'm the client? What if I'm the person that's being put in place of you, for example, like, and didn't know it? Like, so let's say they did take your branding off, so I wasn't aware that it was you, and I've been given this job. So you're now sitting in the background going, Kurt should know that was my job, or like, that person's got, and I don't know. I'm innocent in this. But from the outside looking in, it might be seen as I've undercut you, like I've taken 10% off your fee.
But I've undercut you. I don't think my brain would go like that. So say I saw someone else working with a client that I thought a good relationship with, I'd probably question it. Whereas the relationship with this client was always just a bit back to the energy. It was always a bit hard work. Like we would literally, Abby and I, my team, we'd see their email address come up and both of us would just pick up the phone to each other and go, like, head bang on the table. Here we go. And that was when I used to talk about we need to divorce this client. And I didn't do it. I didn't have the balls. But this is a whole other conversation about endings that I'm going to do in some other podcasts. And how do you end well? Whether that's in a relationship, a personal relationship, a business relationship, the end of a workshop. How do you end well? There is definitely a way. So anyway, that was not my finest example of ending well.
Yeah.
Funny, huh?
I like you've opened another Pandora's box there, because like I think the ending well is I think there's a perception that endings sometimes need to be some sort of clash rather than ending well. And it's like, we're afraid of this ending. So instead of being upfront and saying we're afraid of this ending, but it needs to happen, what we're going to do is we're going to find a reason to end it. We're going to look through all the paperwork and see if there's something that we can pull them apart, and we'll point a finger and say you didn't or you should have. So then we have a fight over it, and then we have like we have a mutual splitting of ways, but it's actually come out of a negative thing rather than actually labeling the thing, which is actually it's the end. It's
and
like
I think it comes from, because I've done a bit of thinking about this and I'll explain why, is where do we see endings happening the most in our lives? It's often in personal relationships. And like 9 out of 10 of personal relationships do not end well, in that they end like there's an argument, there's a I don't love you anymore, you cheated on me. So there's a catastrophe that sits around it, and there's this energy. Whereas endings can be beautifully handled, and they can be framed, and they can be honouring, and you can share what you need to share. And the reason I've got to be in my bonnet about endings is I can cry my podcast, can I? I can cry my podcast.
You can show you're real.
So next week, a personal relationship is ending, and it's ending not because we don't like one another. It's ending because he's got to go back to Australia, and we decided that it's not going to work to carry it on. But it's not ending because we're angry with each other or someone's cheated on the other person. So me being me, like dived into my knowledge of endings when it comes to workshops and what does it mean to have a really good ending. So this poor guy, who's the antithesis of me in style, he's an engineer actually. I sort of wrote the newsletter that's coming out next week, and I sent it to him. I said, I thought you might like to see this. This is what endings mean to me. And he's just like, yeah. So we're having 24 hours together to say goodbye.
That's beautiful, but so unique that you're telling a story that should be told more often, more openly, so more people, younger people particularly, can hear it, because I think they believe an ending needs to be some sort of anger, frustration, cross words, what have you. I heard a story from someone close to me the other day where he sat with his partner across a table. It was his second relationship, and they just looked at each other and just went, we need to end, don't we? Like, it was just like a mutual looking at each other. And it's because there was other complications with children from other relationships, things not working in that way. And as much as they loved each other, they knew that it wasn't going to work, and they didn't fight. They just looked at each other, nodded, and went, "Yeah, it's not going to." Yeah, I don't know the exact phrasing, but there wasn't anything thrown at each other.
Yeah,
and I think if we can hear more of those stories, then we can accept that actually we don't have to be at loggerheads. We don't have to be right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Both things can be true.
Yes.
It needs to end, but I love you. It needs to end, but I don't want to lose you. It needs to end, but this is going to be the hardest thing ever to do. Like, both things are true. Not I dislike you, and like the other thing does happen somewhere. But wow. That's a big thing.
So got that going on. So, and I think if I take it back to where we started on endings with a client relationship, it's being okay when a client relationship comes to an end, and naming it, and being okay, or finishing a project and being okay that a project has finished. And back to where we even started our conversation 50 minutes ago, like, what do you do in those quiet times? Like, you come off the back of a really great project and there is the quiet. So how do you use that? And that is all okay. That is part of the cycle that we go through. Oh, how good do we sound? Like, we've just made it into a cycle and we've joined it all up.
Yeah, it is.
It's amazing.
What was it? There's a ending thing that was... it's gone from me. We have to end up like having this quiet moment now.
That's okay. Well, I think we move towards the ending, because this has been a really good conversation. On the podcast, when we come to the end, if you remember what you want to share, we'll put it in. But here's some quick fire questions for you.
Okay.
As we come to the end of our conversation today, because this feels like a natural place if we're talking about endings. So I've got 4 questions for you.
Go for it.
What advice would you give to someone starting out as a facilitator, trainer, consultant, or coach?
Be good, do good, and good will happen. And what that generally means is be good at what you do, get good at your craft, be good when you're out there, and trust that good will come back to you.
Love.
If there was an additional, it would be don't do it alone. Like, look for people who will be there when you fall over, or that sort of thing. But
love it. Who do you follow in social media land that you think other people should know about?
I don't think there's one person at any one time. At the moment, I'm enjoying, and it's not a work-related thing, a guy from British Cycling called Keith Sharp. He puts poems on a daily basis that are very deep and thought-provoking on LinkedIn. So you don't see that sort of thing on LinkedIn. And it's, he's heading out to Paris soon for the next Olympic Games. And the thought process of being a performing coach and a performing athlete and all that. And he's writing poetry that resonates. Keith Sharp.
What book do you recommend at this time? Or what book do you like to recommend?
I'd recommend How Much Is Enough, the book that I mentioned earlier. It talks about the value of money and versus time, and what is the good life.
I like that. A final question. How have you invested in yourself or your business to support you in moving forward?
Invested in myself by never. So every time there's a quiet moment, trying to figure out what am I going to learn to be good or better at, and searching out people that are different to me and having conversations. So I don't need to go and find people like me, because we'll just sit around agreeing. And that's fun, but it can be boring after a while.
Yeah.
So I like to actually find people that are quite different and have a conversation and understand why do they think the way they think, because it might influence my appreciation of the world or them or work or what have you.
Brilliant. Kurt, thank you. Love that conversation. That was brilliant.
Good.
It was good. I really appreciate you being a guest on a facilitator's journey today.